Ontario is burning, and now the skies themselves are turning against it. Across the vast forests of the province, wildfires have torn through an enormous expanse of land, scorching well over 610,000 acres and pushing this into the territory of one of the worst fire seasons the province has ever recorded. Entire communities have been forced to flee. Thick smoke has choked the air across huge distances, and firefighters have been stretched to their limits, battling blazes across a remote and rugged landscape. And just when it seemed the situation could not grow more dangerous, a new threat is bearing down. Severe storms are targeting the province, sweeping in with the potential to make everything worse, and the people of Ontario are bracing for what these volatile skies may bring. This is a crisis unfolding on two fronts at once. On one side, the relentless wildfires, feeding on a landscape parched by heat and drought, consuming forest at a staggering rate and threatening the communities scattered across the northern wilderness. On the other, the arrival of severe weather, storms that carry their own dangers and that could either bring desperately needed rain or, in the cruelest twist, unleash the lightning and wind that spark and spread even more fire. It is a moment of profound uncertainty and danger for a province already reeling, a collision of fire and storm that has put emergency officials, firefighters, and residents alike on the highest alert. In this video, we are going to break down exactly what is happening across Ontario right now. We will look at the scale of the wildfires that have already burned so much of the province, the remote landscape where they rage, and the communities forced to evacuate before the advancing flames. We will examine the choking smoke that has spread across the region and beyond, the exhausted crews fighting to hold the line, and the reasons this fire season has become so severe. And we will turn to the severe storms now taking aim at Ontario, the double-edged threat they pose, and what they could mean for a province caught between fire and sky. Stay with us, because this is a fast-moving and dangerous emergency, and understanding what is unfolding across Ontario right now matters for everyone in its path. Hashtag, a record-breaking fire season. To grasp the gravity of this moment, you first have to understand just how severe this wildfire season has become for Ontario, because it is not an ordinary summer of fires. It is shaping up to be one of the worst on record, a season in which the amount of land burned has climbed to extraordinary levels, far beyond what a typical year would see. When a province burns through this much forest, it signals that something has gone deeply wrong, that the conditions have aligned in a way that turns the normal rhythm of the fire season into something far more destructive and dangerous. The sheer scale of the area burned is difficult to comprehend. Hundreds of thousands of acres reduced to ash and blackened ground. Vast stretches of forest consumed, an expanse of land so large it is hard to picture. And this is not the work of a single monstrous fire, but of many fires burning across the province, some of them enormous, spreading across the wilderness and merging the devastation into a total that has pushed this season into the record books. Each fire is its own emergency, its own front in a battle being fought across an immense and difficult landscape, and together they have made this a season that Ontario will remember for a very long time. The number of acres burned is not just a statistic. It is a measure of forest lost, of habitat destroyed, of air fouled with smoke, and of communities forced to flee. And when that number climbs into the record-breaking range, it tells the story of a province in the grip of a genuine and prolonged emergency. Hashtag, the vast and remote north. To understand where and how these fires burn, you have to understand the landscape of the province. Because much of Ontario is covered by an immense expanse of forest stretching across the northern reaches. A vast and often remote wilderness of trees, lakes, and rugged terrain. This great northern forest is beautiful and wild, but it is also, in the dry heat of summer, dangerously flammable, and it is here, in these remote reaches, that many of the most serious wildfires burn. The remoteness of this landscape is one of the greatest challenges in fighting the fires. Much of the northern forest is far from roads and cities, accessible only with difficulty, a wilderness where fires can grow large before crews can even reach them, and where the tools of firefighting must often be brought in by air. When a fire ignites deep in this remote country, whether from a lightning strike or another source, It can spread across the dry forest with little to stop it, feeding on the trees and the undergrowth, racing across the landscape driven by wind and fueled by the parched conditions. Battling these fires means working in some of the most difficult terrain imaginable, far from support, in conditions that test the endurance and the courage of the crews to their limits. And this is not empty wilderness. It is a landscape that is home to communities, many of them small and remote, including indigenous communities whose people have lived on this land for generations, and that threat has driven one of the most heartbreaking aspects of this entire emergency: the forced flight of communities from their homes before the advancing flames. Hashtag communities forced to flee. As the wildfires have spread across the province, they have driven people from their homes, forcing evacuations across the affected regions and creating a wave of displacement that has touched many communities. When a fire bears down on a community, threatening lives and property, there comes a point where the only responsible choice is to get people out, to evacuate them to safety before the flames arrive. And this season, that agonizing decision has had to be made again and again. For the remote communities of the North, evacuation is an especially daunting undertaking. Many of these communities are far from major centers, connected to the wider world by limited routes. And moving their residents to safety can require enormous logistical effort, sometimes involving airlifts to carry people out of harm's way when the fires threaten to cut off the escape routes. Families are uprooted from their homes, sometimes with very little warning, and taken far from everything they know to shelter in distant communities and evacuation centers while they wait, anxiously, to learn the fate of the homes and the lands they left behind. It is a wrenching experience to flee your home not knowing whether it will still be standing when you return, and to be displaced into an uncertain limbo while the fire runs its course. This displacement has fallen with particular weight on Indigenous communities, many of which are located in the remote fire-prone regions of the North, and which have faced repeated threats and evacuations. For these communities, the fires threaten not only homes and safety, but a deep connection to the land, a relationship that stretches back through generations. To be forced from that land by fire, to watch the forests that are woven into their history and their way of life go up in flames, carries a weight of loss that goes beyond the physical damage. The evacuations are a stark human dimension of this crisis, a reminder that behind the statistics of acres burned are real people, real families, real communities, uprooted and displaced by a disaster they did not cause and cannot control. Hashtag the smoke that spread for hundreds of miles. One of the most far-reaching effects of these wildfires has extended well beyond the flames themselves, reaching people hundreds and even thousands of miles from the fires. That effect is smoke. When forests burn on this scale, they produce an immense volume of smoke, and that smoke does not stay put. It rises high into the atmosphere and drifts on the winds across vast distances, spreading a pall of haze far beyond the fire zones and degrading the air quality over enormous areas, affecting the health and the daily lives of huge numbers of people who may never see a flame. The smoke from Ontario's fires has spread across the region and traveled great distances, carried by the winds to blanket communities and cities far from the burning forests. It has turned skies hazy, dimmed the sun, and prompted air quality warnings across wide areas, as the tiny particles in the smoke pose a real threat to health. Wildfire smoke is genuinely hazardous to breathe, filled with fine particles that can penetrate deep into the lungs and cause a range of health problems, and it is especially dangerous for vulnerable groups, for children, the elderly, pregnant women, and people with heart or lung conditions. When the smoke settles over a region, the guidance is to stay indoors as much as possible, to keep windows closed, and to limit outdoor activity, as the very air becomes a hazard. For many people, the smoke is the most direct way they experience these fires, a constant, visible reminder of the vast burning happening somewhere over the horizon. And when the fires are as large and as numerous as they have been this season, that smoke can be relentless, blanketing the region for days at a time. Hashtag the storms now bearing down, and now, into this already dire situation, comes a new and volatile threat. Severe storms are targeting Ontario, sweeping toward the province, with the potential to transform an already dangerous crisis in unpredictable ways. The arrival of severe weather at such a moment is a source of enormous concern, because storms are a double-edged force when a landscape is ablaze, capable of bringing either relief or catastrophe, and often carrying dangers all their own. On one hand, storms can bring rain, and rain is what a fire-stricken landscape most desperately needs. A good, soaking rainfall could help dampen the parched forests, slow the spread of the fires, and give the exhausted firefighting crews a chance to gain ground. For a fire-stricken province, the prospect of rain is genuine hope. But storms in a dry, fire-prone landscape are rarely so simple or so kind, because they carry with them other forces that can make the situation dramatically worse. The greatest danger is lightning. Severe storms often bring lightning, and lightning is one of the primary ways that wildfires ignite in the wilderness. A storm that rolls across the dry northern forest can hurl bolts of lightning into the parched landscape, and if those strikes are not accompanied by enough rain to matter, each one is a potential new ignition, a fresh fire started in the tender dry forest. In this way, the very storms that might bring rain can also seed a whole new crop of fires, adding to the burden on a firefighting system already stretched to its limits. And storms bring wind, sometimes powerful, gusty, and erratic wind, which is among the most dangerous forces in a wildfire, capable of whipping existing fires into greater fury, driving them across the landscape at frightening speed and carrying embers ahead to start new spot fires. A storm's wind can turn a manageable fire into a raging inferno in a matter of hours, and can make the behavior of the fires wildly unpredictable and far more dangerous for the crews fighting them. Hashtag, when fire and storm collide, the collision of severe storms with an active wildfire crisis creates one of the most challenging and dangerous situations that emergency officials can face, because it multiplies the threats and the uncertainty many times over. When storms bear down on a province that is already burning, the people responsible for managing the emergency must contend with the fires they are already fighting and the new dangers the storms may bring, all at once, in a situation that can change rapidly and without much warning. Beyond their effect on the fires, the severe storms carry hazards of their own that threaten the province directly. Severe weather can bring damaging winds capable of knocking down trees and power lines, cutting electricity and blocking roads. It can bring heavy downpours that cause flooding, especially dangerous in areas where the land has been scorched by fire, because burned ground can shed water rather than absorbing it, leading to rapid runoff, and the threat of flash flooding and debris flows in and below the burn areas. Storms can bring hail, and in the most severe cases, even more violent weather. So even setting aside their effect on the fires, the storms themselves pose a real and serious threat to the safety of people across the province, adding another layer of danger to an already perilous moment. Ontario is caught between two great forces of nature, the fire on the ground and the storm in the sky, and the interaction between them is complex and unpredictable. Hashtag, the exhausted frontline standing against this dual threat of fire and storm are the firefighters and emergency crews, whose work throughout this record-breaking season has been nothing short of heroic. These are the men and women who have spent the long, brutal months of this fire season battling blazes across the remote and difficult landscape of the province, working in punishing conditions. Far from support, in the smoke and the heat, to protect the communities and the forests of Ontario. And now, as the storms bear down, their task grows only harder and more dangerous. Fighting wildfires in the vast northern wilderness is grueling and perilous work, conducted over long shifts in rugged terrain far from roads and resources, and in a season as severe as this one. With so many fires burning for so long, the demand on these crews has been immense. Help is often brought in from other regions to reinforce the effort, but even so, the sheer scale of the emergency means the crews are working under enormous strain. The arrival of severe storms adds yet another dimension of danger to their already hazardous work. Lightning threatens the crews directly, and the possibility of new fires sparked by the storms means more work, more fronts to fight, even as they battle the existing blazes. High winds make the fires more dangerous and unpredictable, putting the crews at greater risk. Fighting fire is dangerous enough on a calm day. Fighting it as severe storms roll in, with all the added hazards they bring, demands extraordinary skill, caution, and bravery. The firefighters and emergency crews of Ontario are the human wall standing between the fires and the communities in their path, and in this record-breaking and storm-threatened season, they are being tested as rarely before. Hashtag why this season is so severe. It is natural to ask why this fire season has become so extraordinarily severe. Why Ontario has burned on such a scale, and the answer lies in a combination of conditions that have come together to create a near-perfect environment for wildfire. The most fundamental factor is the weather. Wildfires thrive on heat, dryness, and wind, and this season the province has experienced conditions that have primed the landscape to burn. Prolonged heat and a lack of adequate rainfall have dried out the vast forests, turning the trees and the undergrowth into ready fuel, and creating the tinder-dry conditions in which fires ignite easily and spread rapidly. Drought and dryness are the great enablers of a severe fire season. When the forests are parched, when the moisture has been baked out of the vegetation, the landscape becomes primed to burn so that any ignition, whether from lightning or from human activity, can quickly grow into a serious fire. Lightning, in particular, is a major cause of the wildfires in the remote northern forests, where storms can hurl strikes into the dry wilderness and start fires far from any help. And once the fires start, the dry, hot, and sometimes windy conditions allow them to spread with alarming speed and to resist the efforts to contain them, so that they grow larger and burn longer than they would in a wetter, cooler year. Behind these immediate conditions lies a broader reality that fire seasons in many parts of the world, including the forests of Canada, have been growing more severe and more frequent in recent years, as warmer and drier conditions extend the fire season and create more opportunities for extreme fire behavior. Ontario's record-breaking season is its own distinct emergency, but it is also part of a larger pattern that has made these catastrophic fire years more common. Hashtag what residents need to know for anyone in Ontario affected by this dual crisis of fire and storm. Staying informed and prepared is absolutely essential, and it can make the difference between safety and danger. The most important principle is to pay close attention to official information and warnings, to monitor the situation for your area, and to be ready to act quickly, because both the fires and the storms can move fast and change rapidly. If you are in a region threatened by wildfire, take evacuation alerts and orders with the utmost seriousness. When you are told to be ready to leave, prepare in earnest, gathering essential documents, medications, and belongings. And when you are told to evacuate, do so immediately, without delay, because in a fast-moving fire, the time to escape can be very short. Prepare for the storms as well as the fires. Severe weather can bring damaging winds, flooding, and other hazards. So stay informed about the forecast and heed any severe weather warnings for your area. Be ready for power outages, keep emergency supplies on hand, and if flooding is a risk, especially near burned areas, be alert to the danger and ready to move to higher ground. Protect yourself from the smoke, staying indoors when the air quality is poor, keeping windows closed, and taking special care of the vulnerable people in your life. And throughout it all, look out for your neighbors, especially those who may need help evacuating or coping with the smoke and the storms, because in an emergency like this, communities come through by taking care of one another. Above all, do not underestimate the danger of this moment, and respect the warnings and the guidance of the emergency officials who are working around the clock to keep people safe. Hashtag the days ahead. As this crisis continues to unfold, the days ahead hold great uncertainty, and much depends on the interplay of fire and weather. If the storms bring soaking rain without too much lightning and wind, they could offer a measure of relief, helping to dampen the fires and easing the pressure on the exhausted crews. But if they bring lightning and wind without enough rain, they could worsen the crisis, sparking new fires and driving the existing ones to greater fury. And in either case, the storms bring their own hazards, the winds and the floods and the severe weather that threaten the province directly. No one can say with certainty how it will play out, and so Ontario waits and watches, hoping for the best while preparing for the worst. Ontario has faced difficult fire seasons before, and its people have shown resilience and strength in the face of them, and they will need that strength again now, as the province confronts one of the most severe fire seasons in its history, alongside the added threat of severe storms. For now, though, the emergency remains acute. More than 610,000 acres burned, and the total still climbing. Communities evacuated, smoke spreading across the region, exhausted crews on the front lines, and severe storms bearing down with all their unpredictable danger. This is a fast-moving and perilous moment for Ontario, a collision of fire and storm that has put the province on the highest alert. Our thoughts are with everyone affected, with the families forced from their homes, with the communities living under threat, and with the brave crews battling the flames. If you are in the affected regions, stay alert, stay informed, and stay safe. Heed the warnings, follow the guidance of the officials, and do not take chances with these powerful forces of nature. And to everyone watching, keep the people of Ontario in your thoughts as they face down this extraordinary crisis, and hold on to the hope that relief, in the form of gentle rain and calmer skies, will soon arrive to bring this weary province the respite it so desperately needs.